I suggest that we collect the questions, and then we will see to whom they are really addressed, and maybe some questions are addressed to several speakers. Merain, you have the floor.
Thank you. I have two small questions for Jean-Baptiste and Carlo. So for Carlo, you mentioned that there's no legal basis for the subsidiarity review. So there's no explicit legal basis, but do we need it? You could also set up a system rather informally that does the same thing without an explicit legal basis. Is it really problematic, the lack of an explicit legal basis? And then for Jean-Baptiste, you compare the EU and the US, but if I saw your slide correctly, you are comparing the consultation of stakeholders in two different phases. For the EU, it's during the negotiations, and the US afterwards. I was just wondering, doesn't that impact on your findings? Can you compare the two? So just a question out of interest.
Sure, I'm sure there are other ones, yes. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you allow me, I would like to make one short statement and then ask a couple of questions.
Short statement, huh?
Short statement.
But important one, I'm sure. An important one. An important statement.
Well, it's just because, well, we will discuss about provisional application in the next panel, and I will also say a few things about it. What I wanted to say is that there is often this argument concerning the legal uncertainties in relation to provisional applications, which I think are largely overestimated, in the sense that provisional application is common practice in international law. Many international agreements have been provisionally applied, and sometimes for extended periods. If you only think that GATT essentially only entered into force in 1994, and the agreement has been provisionally applied since 1947. But this said, my two questions are the first, both for Carlo actually. So the first one concerns your reference to vertical asymmetry. So you referred, there is a vertical asymmetry in respect to the positions of the European Parliament on the one hand and national parliaments on the other, and then you said that's acceptable, but you did not further elaborate on it, I guess for want of time, so if you could perhaps say a few things about it. And then the second is also for you, it concerns the unilateral termination of provisional applications on the part of national parliaments. Now, I think there is room for arguing by having a look at the texts of UFTAs that there are actually only two parties to provisional application. The third country in question on the one hand, and the European Union on the other. So what's your opinion about that, and if you think that that could actually have an impact on the role of national parliaments? Thank you.
Thank you very much for these questions. Any other question? Yes, please, Mauro.
Very quick question for Jean-Baptiste. You mentioned the fact that there is seclusion in the US and repression in the EU concerning impact assessment for dissenting voices, which leads me to wonder, well, then impact assessments are not about assessment at all, which means, do they have an impact? Sorry for the pun. And this question actually leads me to another for Carlo, more or less along the same lines. I understand the national parliaments are really interested in exercising some kind of control on negotiations. They did, in the case of the Wallonian parliament, at least exercise a control after the negotiations. But then you tell me that they showed an unwillingness to exercise control, in fact. So this leads me also to wonder, did national parliaments perform any assessment of negotiations in practice, and did they have any impact?
Okay. All very interesting questions, I must say. Any other question or comment? You can ask a question as well, of course, yes? Please, you have the floor. For the question, you don't have the microphone.
No, that's fine. I'll
you speak very loud. Shout your question more or less, you know? Yeah?
So I would like to ask the following question. I would like to know if you talked about the role of parliaments, and I would like to know if there's any room for subnational governments, local governments. I talked about a interscalar disconnect or mismatch. You use the term mismatch. I would like to know if for you, also you talked about geographic indication. Can they play any role using constitutional tools, or would this have to do more with stakeholder consultation? What's your take on this?
I think that's also a very good question. Only very good questions. Anybody else? Anybody else who has questions burning on their lips but have never dared to raise them? Now you have the floor. The ultimate appeal, request. Nobody? Then I will add myself a little question, if I may. J'aimerais poser la question à Josiane, parce qu'elle a mentionné en certain moment, j'avais noté, je ne sais pas si oui, le Parlement qui donne l'approbation ne veut pas que ça soit uniquement le droit de veto. C'est ce que vous avez dit, n'est-ce pas? J'aimerais savoir ce que ça devrait inclure. Et lié à cela, and that I will continue in English because it may also concern other speakers. I understand, of course, very well the tendency to employ Parliament more in the democratic process of making agreements. But I think this has also another side. The other side is that you must make life still possible for the EU in international relations. The more you have this type of interventions, the more I think the credibility of the European Union can be affected by this, if it is not handled very well. And we already have seen this, of course, a couple of times now. And this is not very good for the EU's position in international relations. So how far can we go with this? It cannot be just that Parliament would have a seat in the negotiations themselves. That's not possible. And nobody there is not one state which functions like this. European Parliament, the European Union cannot function like this. So what are your suggestions? You are the experts on this topic, and I think it would be good that we have some clarification about this. So I don't know. Most of the questions were addressed to some of our speakers. May I just ask you to be short in your answers, clear and short.
Okay. I'll start then. Okay, thank you for these questions. It's difficult to be brief. I'll try to do so. First of all, what is the problem on legal basis for early warning mechanism? To apply this mechanism to EU FTAs? Well, actually, I think for time constraint, I just carve out this part of the presentation. But I think that one could theorize a legal basis for applying early warning mechanism on the basis of the notion of special legislative procedure that is not really specified under the treaties, or one could wonder whether there are the approval procedure is to a certain extent also for international agreement a special legislative procedure. But in any case, your question was why we do need a legal basis. It's interesting. I don't know whether it's a reply to your question, but it's interesting to know that even if you look at the political dialogue, that is the more soft mechanism that exists for national parliament participation in EU decision-making, all the proposals related with the green card and so on and so forth, if you look at all works done by COSAC, it is all concentrating on legislative proposals. So the national parliament themselves do not want, I don't know why, I mean, I wonder why, to use this soft law mechanism also for international agreement. There was only one proposal by the Luxembourg Chambre des Députés that is reported in the 23rd COSAC report, 2015 one, to use actually the political dialogue to oblige to a certain extent the Commission to build up a flow of direct information to national parliaments. But it's the only proposal, and basically all the other 39 chambers, to a certain extent, do not embrace this use of political dialogue. As for the vertical asymmetries, yes, of course, the question is more complex than just the cursory comment I made. What is interesting to think, I think my perspective is that it is only, I mean, from an EU law perspective, you can accept the vertical asymmetry between European Parliament and the national parliament, because if you look at constitution, national constitution, you won't find you find, of course, the traditional relation between openness and confidentiality in external relation. And if you look at the EU constitution, if you want, if you look at EU treaties, it is exactly the opposite. I mean, it's the only constitutional convention, I don't know what to call it, that also for external relation use this traditional transparency, confidentiality relation that applies in internal relations. So transparency is the rule and confidentiality is the exception also for external relations. I think it's the only constitutional chart that do that. And then, of course, there are the reasons related with the absence of the legal framework that is, I think, that is in place for European Parliament and European Commission through the framework agreement. As for determination of provisional application, I think it's a question of competence in the end that you made. Whether EU is competent to provisionally apply even the provision that falls within the shared competence of the EU member state, apart from the exclusive competence. It's true that if you look at the decision on the provisional application of CETA, yeah, it appears that it is an EU decision. So the party of provisional application is the EU and on EU and member state. I think it's, I mean, it's a question, it's the same questions that were asked yesterday, I think, as for mixity, whether shared competences means facultative mixity or mandatory mixity, and that goes also for provisional application. I think that I mean, it's difficult to envisage provisional application of a treaty, a meaningful provisional application of a treaty as a form of EU-only decision. I mean, although it is adopted by the Council. Finally, impact assessment and unwillingness to conduct overseeing of external action by national governments. I think it's striking, just a brief comment, it's striking to note, and it was the COSAC report once more, the 23rd report, biannual report, to note that I think 34, 35, if I remember well, out of 38 chambers in Europe do not exercise any form of impact assessment over TTIP and other EU FTAs. So there is not even the intention by national parliament to try to build up a competing narrative about impact assessment compared to the one developed by the Commission.
I think that
yeah, there was the question on regional governments. Yeah, basically, of course, regional governments can play a role also from a strictly legal perspective, apart from the consultation. If you look at the Belgian statement attached to the decision of the Council on the provisional application of CETA, you see exactly this. The idea that the national government, the federal government, should take into account the will of regional governments, for instance, in relation to determination of provisional application. So,
thank you. Other reactions, please.
Oui, alors, à propos du pouvoir d'approbation, donc le Parlement ne veut pas qu'on l'assimile à un... Dans le cadre de la procédure de conclusion des accords, le traité de Lisbonne lui a reconnu le pouvoir d'approbation en matière de politique commerciale commune et le droit d'être informé pleinement et immédiatement du déroulement des négociations. Alors, le droit d'approuver les accords effectivement, donne au Parlement européen le droit d'opposer un veto à l'entrée en vigueur de l'accord, s'il n'est pas d'accord avec ce qui a été négocié. Mais ça, c'est une position du tout ou rien, et qui, je dirais, n'est pas d'ailleurs dans l'avantage aussi des relations internationales, parce que lorsqu'on a négocié pendant des années, ce n'est pas pour que le Parlement, à la fin, dise « non, moi, je ne suis pas d'accord, je ne vais pas approuver cet accord ». Je pense que tant dans l'intérêt de la coopération internationale que dans la logique démocratique, il est important que le Parlement puisse effectivement s'exprimer, puisse faire valoir sa position en s'appuyant précisément sur le droit d'être pleinement et entièrement informé, en s'appuyant sur le principe de transparence, le principe d'ouverture. Et donc, que va faire le Parlement? Il va chercher à influer le cours des négociations. Et c'est la stratégie qu'il privilégie. Et bien sûr, lorsqu'on compare sous cet angle la condition du Parlement européen à celle des parlements nationaux, le Parlement européen, finalement, se trouve dans une position privilégiée. Il a, je dirais, comme il l'a déjà fait en matière législative, à l'époque où était en vigueur de façon très ponctuelle, d'ailleurs, la procédure dite de l'avis conforme, le Parlement, là aussi, n'était pas satisfait de cette procédure et il a cherché, en mettant sous pression la Commission et le Conseil également, à pouvoir influer sur la procédure législative. On retrouve un petit peu le même mouvement en ce qui concerne la procédure de conclusion des accords internationaux. Et je dirais, cela, bien sûr, ne fait pas du Parlement européen une institution qui a compétence pour intervenir directement dans les négociations. Hein, absolument pas. Mais le Parlement cherche, et je crois que les négociations du PTCI sont tout à fait illustratives. Il cherche à influer le cours des négociations et, comme je l'ai dit, tirer la sonnette d'alarme s'il estime que, effectivement, les négociations ne vont pas dans un sens favorable aux intérêts des citoyens de l'Union.
Merci beaucoup pour cette précision. You have a reaction to one of the questions. Quick reaction, please.
Yes, thank you for great questions. Very quickly, Merin's question on the, whether, the fact that
Thank you very much. Do you have any reaction to the questions? I don't know, but I don't remember now whether a question was specifically addressed to you or not, or that.
I don't think so.
No. I think we are concluding the session with some delay, as you know, I may have noticed. But I would like to thank, in particular, that's my last words really, the organizers, the driving forces behind this initiative, Isabel and Cecile have done a wonderful job, I think, so far. It's really very stimulating also for us to be here and to be able to participate in this event. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. And we see each other after the break, I'm sure.